the Red Wings. One of the most timeless themes for the iconic beginning of Final Fantasy IV. I've probably seen and heard this introduction more times in existence than any other, and that's beyond the fact that my cartridge had a penchant for restarting my progress. Hi, I'm Jesse, and welcome to Retro Dark. Being this channel's first video, I thought there wouldn't be a better start than a retrospect on one of my favorite games of all time. But before that, maybe a little bit of history. The year is 1991, and I received my very first Super Nintendo over the holidays. I went absolutely wild. We're talking N64 kid wild. For me, it was huge because, I had my very own console. No longer did I have to go to family members or, friends' houses to play. It was all mine. Obviously, like many folks, the very first game I ever played was Super Mario World, which, phenomenal platformer, one of the greatest of all time, but that's not what the video is today about. It's about Final Fantasy IV. About 6 months after I got my Super Nintendo, I had a neighbor who brought this cartridge over. I was struck by the, pretty simple but, red design. It caught my eye. And so, I was like jonesing to play it. He did try and temper my expectations a little bit. Being an RPG, you have to go at it a different pace. I played about an hour, get through the introduction where you get to the Village of Mist, and I was absolutely hooked. He was gracious enough to lend it to me for a week, which, obviously holding it in my hand today, has extended to today, which I still thank him. But it got me thinking. I've played this game more times than I can count, and most recently on the Pixel Collection. What makes this game so good? Let's start with the story. I've always heard that Final Fantasy IV was the game when storytelling became a more focal point for the series. Having finally played Final Fantasy 1 through 3 most recently, I can attest that that is no lie. The story of Final Fantasy IV is classic, taking us to an unnamed blue planet where airships rule the skies, and sword and shield and magical abilities are on full display. We open on the Red Wings, the airship force of the Kingdom of Baron, who have just stolen one of the world's crystals from the peaceful mage town of Mysidia. Cecil, the Dark Knight commander, wrestles with the violence imposed on Mysidia in what seemed to be a rather peaceful world. Even though Cecil is revered by his men, when he arrives home and questions King Baron's intent, he is immediately removed from his post and sent on a strange errand. To make amends for his insubordination, he must deliver a strange ring to Mist Village. Along with his best friend Kain, the commander of the Dragoons, they set off with that classic Final Fantasy theme. Cecil and Kain both refuse to believe that King Baron could ever have any sort of evil machinations, and so they proceed forward. They brave the fields of Baron, venture deep into Mist Cave, and do battle and eventually overcome the mighty Mist Dragon. Upon arriving at Mist Village, the ring explodes in a violent fury, engulfing the entire village in an instant. Cecil cannot believe what has transpired, and before he can come to his full senses, they meet a young girl whose mother has just died. By destroying the Mist Dragon, this young girl's mother, who summoned the beast, has passed on. Kain immediately moves to finish his orders, while Cecil has a change in conscience. He's loyal to Baron, but he cannot abide by such wanton destruction. He convinces Kain that they must get to the bottom of this change in foreign policy and restore the peaceful Kingdom of Baron to its rightful state. Before they can gather up the girl, she unleashes the summoned Titan, and it all goes to black. Cecil is left alone with this girl, who he whisks off to the nearby settlement of Kaipo. Upon setting up at the inn, Baron soldiers come to take back the girl. Cecil stands firm and defends her. He will stand with Baron's tyranny no further. The soldiers lay defeated. The captain retreats. The girl looks to her protector and introduces herself as Rydia. This is simply the beginning of Cecil's journey as he crisscrosses the planet, the underground, and even the moon itself. This beginning is probably only the first 30-60 minutes of your journey, but it establishes so many of the overarching themes that occur throughout the entire game. Redemption. Cecil's journey throughout the story to recover the crystals that he played a part in stealing at the very beginning. Betrayal. Baron's change perpetrated by our main villain, Golbez, who orchestrates a silent coup, installing a fiend as the new king and himself as the new commander of the Red Wings. And vengeance. In a world of evil, numerous characters are driven by the thirst for revenge. Tella's lost daughter, Edge's kingdom and parents, Rydia's mother and home. These are core story beats, driven by phenomenal and fairly layered characters for a game of its time. More on that later. Now, I want to delve a little bit deeper into the enhanced gameplay that flanked the increased focus on story. Most obviously, Final Fantasy IV established the active battle system, which became the standard for Final Fantasy and many other RPGs to follow. No longer did characters sit politely taking turns smacking each other around. To an extent, yes, even though it is still turn-based, there was an increased fluidity to the combat. You had to act fast, and with purpose, always being on your toes, dealing out damage and healing in equal measures, now in real time. It not only made battles far more involved, it added a whole new strategic element. Differing times for different abilities. Do you use a more powerful spell with a longer cast time, or a weaker one for a quick turnaround? It was always a gamble. Spells like haste and slow changed entirely to quicken or slow your ATB gauge. Some stat effects had a runtime, such as the encroaching stone effect. Besides battles being more involved, there was just so much more to do. There were many obvious enhancements moving from the 8-bit Nintendo to the 16-bit Super Nintendo. More detailed character sprites, an increased sound chip really helped immerse players, and this could be felt throughout the many locales this adventure took you on. You start in a standard medieval overworld, but below the depths of the earth was an entire underground world where the dwarves and dark crystals dwell. You think that's more than enough? Well, the game's finale takes us off-world to visit the moon itself. We visit these places with various vehicles, including airships, hovercrafts, and even our own interstellar cruiser. Beyond these diverse areas to explore, there are a number of great side quests that include finding unique equipment and powerful hidden summons. One of my favorite side quests is Rydia's return to the Land of Summons. It's not only a cool new area with some interesting mechanics, which include the usage of float to avoid damage from the floor, and enemies who favored earthquake attack. This also gives Rydia some additional backstory and provides us, the player, with some new summons to boot. This is also required if you want a chance at recruiting Bahamut later to your cause. And this seems like a good time to cover my last main love of the game, which is the characters. Final Fantasy IV was a huge step for fully formed characters within Final Fantasy. Each not only was unique from a gameplay perspective, but they had their own motivations, wants, needs, and overarching character arcs. Let's start with our main protagonist, Cecil. He starts off with his misgivings, but still follows the orders of King Baron, feeling he is incapable of change due to the blood on his hands and his Dark Knight status. It's not till his meeting with Rydia that he truly begins to wake up to justice and begins his redemption arc. This crescendos with him making his journey to Mount Ordeal, where he must overcome his doubts, his fears, and overall past to become a paladin. He literally fights his past self to prove that he is no longer who he once was. He's not only changed from a story perspective, but a gameplay perspective as well, as we the player now play as a newly minted level 1 paladin. We quickly also become far more powerful than his previous Dark Knight incarnation. I also personally enjoyed laying waste to the zombie inhabitants on Mount Ordeal with his new light-based sword, where our previous Dark Knight sword really didn't cut the mustard. Though Cecil overcame his past, the sage Tella is a sad example of a character who could not. Shortly after making our way to the kingdom of Daisyan, Tella witnesses his daughter, Anna's death, after the castle is bombed and pillaged by Golbez's Red Wings. After dropping one of the greatest localization lines of Spoony Bard, he goes in search of the power to avenge his daughter. After meeting him again on Mount Ordeal, as soon as Cecil has let go of his hatred to become a paladin, Tella recalls all his spells, which only further fuels his vengeance. Later, when Tella finally confronts Golbez at the Tower of Zot, he flies into an absolute fury, throwing every spell he has at his disposal. After no effect, he uses the ancient spell of Meteor, something that even the Elder of Mysidia warned him against, but he is so blinded by his hatred that he goes through with it. Golbez is merely wounded, while our hero Sage succumbs to his exertion. At least, in passing on, he'll be with his daughter again. Speaking of that Spoony Bard Edward, from a gameplay perspective, he's a little below par, but he does have an interesting arc himself. Like Tella, he loses Anna, who's his lover, but unlike Tella, with the support from his friends, he does not lose himself to vengeance or self-pity. Because he does not lose himself, he resolves to grow stronger, to protect those that he loves. This can be seen during the battle with the Dark Elf. Even though Edward at this juncture may be beaten and bruised, he musters the strength to play his harp. This music counteracts the Dark Elf's magnetic force field, allowing Cecil and his party the ability to dispatch the fiend and reclaim the Earth Crystal. That is something that is so great about this game. Many of these character moments and arcs are intertwined with the actual gameplay itself. Look at Rydia, who early on learns all her black magic, minus fire, due to her traumatic experience of seeing her hometown razed. It isn't until the kind words from Rosa and the need to save Thabul that Rydia learns fire magic. This leads to the destruction of an ice barrier, which blocked the party's progress. I mean, even the villains have some character development to an extent. Look at Rubicante, the leader and most powerful of the elemental fiends. Don't get me wrong, he is a bad dude, but he is not without his own sense of honor. After the heart-wrenching scene where Edge's parents have been transformed into these abominations, it leads to a battle and their ultimate deaths. We then fight Rubicante. He ultimately takes a moment to abominate the twisted work of Dr. Lugue and apologize to Edge, knowing full well it doesn't mean much to Edge, but to Rubicante it means much to his sort of sense of honor. In addition, he restores the party to full health prior to the fight, as he does not want any sort of advantage going into that battle. Though, when it comes to villains, the main spotlight circles on Golbez, particularly in the late game with the reveal that he is Cecil's long-lost brother. This shocking revelation comes just as Golbez is restored to his senses, after which he rushes to face Zemus to finally end his twisted machinations that kicked off the entire story. Like Cecil, he walked a path of darkness, but unlike the former, as he was unable to find any sort of redemption, it led to his defeat at the hands of Zeromus. After Zeromus is soundly defeated by Cecil and his party, Golbez makes the decision that he cannot return home, as he must atone for his evil deeds, choosing to stay with the Lunarians on the moon. This gives us quite a poignant moment where the party turns to Cecil to see if he will truly let his brother leave without any sort of acknowledgement. A simple "goodbye, my brother" from Cecil is a memorable but bittersweet end to Golbez's story and character arc. Now, before closing, I would be remiss if I didn't mention Kain, my favorite character and Dragoon, and the reason I've probably mainly played as a Dragoon in Final Fantasy XIV. In the end, Kain does not attend the wedding of Cecil and Rosa, as he feels he too must atone for the wrongs he's committed, and chooses to traverse Mount Ordeal as Cecil did so long ago. I really feel like I could go on and on and on about Final Fantasy IV. I mean, it's one of my favorite games of all time and RPGs to boot. So simple, yet for a game of its time, quite complex when you dig a little below the surface. It, to me, is the game that Final Fantasy really found its voice, that, it continues to grow, to people's joy or malignment today. It also is the game that really made me the gamer I am today. Though I enjoy a ton of genres, RPGs always feel like sort of soup for the soul. It's the genre that I love the most and continue to play the most to this day. With that, thank you for watching and hope to see you again soon.